Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to be focusing and talking a little bit more about the importance of having checklists and standard operating procedures in your practice. Now, for those that are new here and don't know me, my name is Romesh Hettiarachchi. I'm a lawyer with over a decade of experience practicing in Toronto, Canada. And I started up my own law firm about 7 years ago, really committed to building out a legal business, a legal practice that's aligned with my wellness. And in 2025, I've been committed to trying and sharing some of these experiences and insights with other lawyers who are also on that same journey. So in this video, I'm going to be diving deep into the importance of having checklists and SOPs when it comes to your practice. And I'm going to talk about this in relation to a conversation I had with a member of the Lawtrepreneur Modern Practice Accelerator. And that mentorship and membership experiences really focus on having a combination of one-on-one discussions as well as an online learning platform. But last week, when my conversation with this lawyer, who's got a really thriving employment law practice. They've been practicing law for about 5 or 6 years. And what Jay was talking about, sharing with me, was some of the challenges he was having in terms of hiring. He had had a couple of experiences previously when it comes to hiring staff, and they didn't work out either because he wasn't able to give them the support they needed for training, or alternatively, they had some challenges when it comes to really performance management sort of thing, right? Because again, as lawyers, we not necessarily have the training needed to be really good employers. And so that was the conversation that we were having last week in our one-on-one conversation. And the funny thing is, of course, he's an employment lawyer, so he's often very well able to talk to clients about employment law, but he was struggling with some aspects of how to do it himself, which, by the way, is not a surprise. I have had the same challenges, and frankly, that's the reason why I've been so committed to doing this, because I think this is information that other lawyers need really, really desperately. So in any event, the struggles that lawyers face when it comes to hiring is that oftentimes they have an inconsistent hiring process. And that inconsistent hiring process is reflected in not having clear success metrics. And without those success metrics, it's really hard to know if the employee is actually progressing and developing the way you want them to. And so one of the things that I would suggest to him was the importance of having a really good checklist as an SOP. And this really came out, so I mentioned I was struggling with this. This really is a thought process or an idea that was really fleshed out by Atul Gawande and his book called The Checklist Manifesto. Now, Atul Gawande, he's a former member of the Biden administration, but for the longest time, he's a surgeon, very prominent surgeon in the States. And his book, The Checklist Manifesto, was really focused on the importance of checklists in all areas of life, including high-risk medical situations. And so what he was talking about and what he detailed in his book is how checklists is a really effective means of standardizing processes so you're not missing anything. It's a really good way of taking mental load off your head. And why having a checklist is a foundation if you want to build out a team, right? Because that's how you delegate, right? And great book, highly recommend it. In his book, he talks about checklists being used in a variety of fields, including like the airline industry, like the medical industry, engineering industry. Checklists are such an important and integral part in all of these fields. And that's why I think that, and that's frankly the reason for this video, because I want to encourage you to consider doing the same for your own practice. Now, I talk about checklists and SOPs. Checklists is a little bit different from SOPs in the sense that they're both important and integral in taking mental load off, but they serve different functions. Checklists are a way of doing things such that um, it's quick, right? It's supposed to be like a quick 1 minute review of tick, 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 tick. And SOPs is more of a detailed instruction guide. And I will show the difference shortly in a demonstration. The purpose of an SOP is to be thorough and standardized. It's really good for training. The purpose of a checklist is more of quality control. Okay, another key difference. Um, so when you are building out your processes and building out your sort of like your training library, what I really would recommend is you start with your SOPs and then build out checklists within them. Okay, and again, I will get onto that. But before I talk about doing a demo, let me focus a little bit about what the purpose of checklists are and their value. So again, checklists, the value of checklists is mental energy, right? Especially as a solo lawyer, you don't really have a lot of time um, to waste, quote unquote. There's lots of needs that you need to be developing over the course of a day. And so all the checklist does, it's a resource that you create at one time and you repeat it over and over and over again. It gives you some consistency. Really good when it comes to reducing anxiety to say, hey, you know what, did I do that, did I not? You'll have a piece of paper to do the checklist. It's amazing if you're delegating. You can give it to a staff member saying, just make sure that this is all done. But especially in legal practice where things are getting more complex and more harder to do just because there's lawyers who are being challenging, you may have a challenging client. If you try to keep everything in your head, it's easy for stuff to be missed. So checklists are a really important means to save your mental health, right? So again, you do it once and you don't need to do it again. So without further ado, let me actually show you what sort of like a checklist and SOP could look like. So this is an example of a onboarding and SOP development thing that I had created for this person, for Jay. And so it's fairly simple, right? And again, the purpose of this worksheet is something you create ahead of time that sets performance metrics for the new staff member. Okay, so you would have your role definition here, which is really focused on who is the worker. You then have your prime responsibilities. What is the responsibilities that this new person is going to be doing? And then you'd have key performance indicators, and we'll dive more into it shortly. But those are really the three components for this first part, the role definition. I then want you to consider an onboarding checklist. An onboarding checklist are the tasks that need to be done for all of the employees, right? And the way I've grouped it, and I don't know why this is a bullet point, it should be checklist, but the way I've structured it is that I've structured it as a before the first day. So these are the things that you've got to do before the first day of work for the employee. And this would include stuff like having the employment agreement signed, having the various technologies set up, having them, if you give them a computer, give them a computer, make sure that's all set up, make sure that payroll is set up because obviously everybody needs to get paid. So that's the first day. And then the first day, what is going to happen the first day? Just imagine your staff member walks into the room, what happens next? So here's like the computer, access keys, workspace tour, all that wonderful good stuff. I've got this thing about training videos. I really like, right now we live in an age where lots of these companies, lots of legal tech firms put training videos together and put them onto YouTube. So if you're going to be doing training, don't try and do it yourself. Tell the employee, tell the staff member to go watch the videos, okay? And I'm going to be dealing with shortly about how to make sure there's some accountability there. But make sure that on their first day, they're watching if there are videos or training that they need to do, make sure that they watch it on YouTube. Don't try and take that hassle on yourself. We then have part 3 where I've broken it down into sort of milestones. And the training schedule and these milestones are really how you make sure that the employee is progressing the way you want them to. My sort of like my hiring and firing philosophy is you hire slow, you fire fast, and if they're great, keep them for as long as possible, right? And the idea being is that it's really hard to find good employees. So when you're hiring someone, take a lot of time in terms of making sure that they're the right person. If they're not the right person, cut ties as soon as possible. And if they're great, try to keep them on for as long as possible. That's my first philosophy. But in any event, first week, make sure that so here, for example, I've said training, watch the training videos, junior associates, so make sure that they've communicated with clients on active files, and then make sure that they've done that, right? So either ticks, grading from 1 to 5, have at it, okay? Then the second week, they should be articulate what are the things that they should be doing in the second week, right? So here it could look like they're attending meetings regularly, they're not showing up late, they're active contributors, they're asking questions, that's that. End of the first month, talking about demand letters, milestones. End of 3 months, you want to make sure that they've got a good attitude, right? Clients are happy, right? That could be another perform for 3 months. Those are some examples of what it could look like, okay? Then the way the work is also structured, it's structured also talking about sort of like work expectations. And that's where, before the employee is hired, you should be thinking about, okay, what are expectations of communication? This is especially important in remote workplaces, okay? The daily review, what is it supposed to be doing on a daily basis? Weekly review, what is it supposed to be doing on a weekly basis? Again, every law firm is going to be different. For example, with my practice, we do a weekly meeting at least once a week, and then we have touch points on a daily basis, right? That's how we work, okay? But again, your business, you don't need to follow what I do. The great part about owning a business, owning your practice, is that you could tailor it to how you want it, right? And then there's an example of an assessments, milestones, and criteria component. And essentially, if they're, let's say, doing demand letters, how are you grading whether their ability, right? So have sort of like assessment criteria around that. And again, you could do that around demand letters, you could do it around software proficiency, task management, whatever those things are, that's great, okay? Above, we talked about key performance indicators. KPIs are basically a metric in the form of a number that you can use to say, you know what, this is great. Okay, so for example, intakes completed. If they're doing intakes, you can ask them, like, look, how many intakes are you doing? You should make sure they're tracking that. Intakes spoken to, intakes filed, intakes completed, retainer letter signed. So that's the ways you can track it. So, I mean, again, this is not meant to be the be all and end all. I'm not pretending that I'm some sort of business guru, because I'm not. I think what I've been able to do is I've spent a lot of time, money, and energy really trying to build systems out for my practice. And I know that other lawyers don't necessarily have that same privilege and opportunity, and that's the reason I'm sharing all of this, right? So again, if this is something you're interested in, you can feel free to use this as a foundation to build out your own worksheet. But again, this is something that is transferable to an intake process or to a file closing process. Having these sorts of checklists is important in that regard. If you want to use this as a foundation of your future learning experience, I'm hosting our monthly workshop for February is all about workflow mapping, and we're going to be doing that in the context of intakes. So redesigning your intake, getting an SOP and a worksheet done there. So if that's of interest to you, you can find more information below. Otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been given value to you, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.